Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. I never thought one weekend trip could change the way I looked at people forever. I was 27 in the summer of 2019, working in risk management for a large bank in Manhattan. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and with the kind of people I worked with, the best part wasn't the office itself. It was the happy hours afterward. Every Friday, when the markets closed, we'd flood into midtown bars, half the office shoulder to shoulder in dim Irish pubs, laughing too loud over pints of beer. That's where I met Dorian Hale. He was a transfer from our Boston office, early 30s, tall, broad-shouldered, and the kind of guy who instantly commanded attention. Dorian had a way of talking, like every story was the most interesting thing you'd ever hear. He spoke about backpacking through Europe, nights in Vegas, wild parties in LA. He claimed to know people, actors, musicians, models, and even though most of it sounded a little too polished, people listened. He was magnetic. I liked him, at least on the surface. He was easy to hang out with, easy to laugh with. But as weeks turned into months, I started noticing the holes in his stories. Details shifted, places changed. He'd brag about a girlfriend who sounded suspiciously like someone ripped from a magazine cover. I began to think of him as entertaining, but not entirely real. Still, he was fun to have around, and sometimes that's enough. That summer, Dorian invited me to his family's condo in Clearwater Beach, Florida. He said his mom owned it, and that he and his sister were heading there for a long weekend. "Come with," he said one afternoon after work, his grin wide. "It'll be great. Sun, ocean, bars, better than sweating your ass off here." It sounded harmless, and when he mentioned there was plenty of space, I asked if I could bring my younger brother, Caleb. He was 20, home from college for the summer, and I thought a beach trip would be good for him. Dorian didn't hesitate. Of course, more the merrier. We flew down on a Thursday. The air in Tampa hit me like a hot, wet towel the second we stepped outside. Caleb groaned and muttered, "How do people live in this humidity?" Waiting at the curb was Dorian's younger sister, Lyra. She drove up in an old silver Jeep Cherokee with cracked leather seats. Lyra was different. She had dark, shoulder-length hair tucked behind thick, round glasses, wore a vintage Talking Heads t-shirt, and had chipped black nail polish. Her vibe was hard to pin down, quirky, sharp, but distant. She gave Caleb and me a quick half smile, then went back to scrolling through her phone as we drove across the causeway. The condo was nicer than I expected. 3 bedrooms, clean white tile floors that stayed cool underfoot, a balcony with a view of the Gulf. The furniture had that coastal look, light wood, blue cushions, seashell decor. Dorian and Lyra each took their own rooms, so Caleb and I shared. I joked, "If I meet a girl, you're stuck on the couch." He rolled his eyes. That first night, since we'd landed too late for the beach, Dorian insisted we hit the strip of bars. The crowd was older, retirees in polo shirts, women in sundresses, but the vibe was relaxed. At least, it should have been. Dorian was different. He started pounding shots the second we sat down. His laugh was louder, his movements looser. He stumbled into conversations with strangers, leaning too close, hitting on women who clearly weren't interested. Caleb and I laughed it off at first. It was awkward, but manageable. Then he crossed a line. A bigger guy confronted him after Dorian wouldn't leave his girlfriend alone. Voices rose. Caleb and I had to step in, pulling Dorian back while I apologized. The guy let it go, but as we walked away, Dorian shoved me hard in the chest. "You're a piece of shit, Adrian," he slurred. "You don't have my back." "Are you serious right now?" I snapped. Caleb stepped in between us. "Just chill, man." Even Lyra told him to relax, but Dorian stormed off into the night, muttering curses. Lyra sighed and followed, saying nothing. Caleb and I stayed behind. We finished our drinks, tried to shake off the tension. A couple of women at the bar, tourists from Ohio, struck up a conversation. We joked, exchanged numbers. They mentioned they were heading downtown later and invited us to join. When we finally walked back to the condo, I texted Dorian asking where he was. His reply came fast. Back at the condo, we opened the door expecting him to be angry, but instead, he jumped up from the couch, grinning like nothing had happened. "So are we going out or what?" he asked, still obviously drunk. I told him maybe later that we should chill first. Then I mentioned the girls we met. His smile vanished. "How many?" he asked flatly. "2, I said. Caleb, trying to be funny, added, "Yeah, they even asked how we knew you." It was the wrong thing to say. Dorian's expression twisted. He stood abruptly and stormed to his room, slamming the door. I glanced at Lyra. "Is he always like this?" She looked at me coldly. "Like what?" "Never mind." The tension was suffocating. Caleb and I retreated to our room, whispering about how bizarre he was acting. I knocked on Dorian's door once, asked if he wanted to come out with us. No response. Eventually, we decided to Uber downtown without them. At the bar, we had fun with the girls, but my phone buzzed non-stop. Dorian was blowing it up. "Where are you? How could you leave me here? Your stuff's going in the street. Don't come back. I don't know why I invited you." I showed Caleb and the girls. Everyone frowned. Caleb muttered, "Something's wrong with him." We cut the night short and headed back. When we walked in, Dorian was sitting on the couch in the dark, staring at the wall. "You okay?" I asked carefully. He turned his head toward me, then looked away. "Yeah, hope you had fun." Then he stood, walked to his room, and shut the door. We tried to shake it off, but as Caleb and I lay in our bunks talking, we heard footsteps on the wood floor outside. "They stopped right in front of our door," I whispered. "He's standing right there." Caleb whispered back, "I know." We didn't move, didn't speak. 5 minutes dragged by before the footsteps finally retreated. Then we heard him talking in the living room, laughing to himself. I crept to the door, opened it a crack. Dorian stood in the corner, leaning against the wall with his head down, whispering. Then he laughed, muttering, "Adrian's such a stupid fuck." My stomach dropped. I shut the door quietly. Caleb and I whispered about leaving in the morning, getting a hotel, but around 20 minutes later, I woke to the sound of the door creaking open. Dorian stood there in the dark, staring. "What are you doing?" I snapped, sitting up. He lunged at me, screaming, hands reaching for my throat. "You're a piece of shit. I invited you here, and you shit on me." Caleb yanked him off me, throwing him into the corner. Dorian scrambled up, yelling, face twisted with rage. We didn't wait. We packed in minutes, called an Uber, and left for a hotel. We stayed there until our flight Sunday. Back in New York, I saw Dorian a few times at the office, but he avoided me completely. Within a month, he'd transferred out. To this day, I don't know what was really wrong with him, but that night in Clearwater Beach still makes my skin crawl. I was 13 the first time I realized how fragile the line was between childhood fun and something that could have ended my life. Back then, I wasn't the kind of kid who thought much about danger. I grew up in a quiet town called Red Cliff, New Hampshire, where most of us knew each other by name, and parents still let their kids roam around until dark without worrying. My parents were protective but not suffocating, and when I begged to go spend the night at my friend Marissa's house one Friday evening in late September of 2019, they didn't think twice about it. Marissa had just moved into this old 2-story house that sat deep in the woods. It wasn't one of those new houses tucked neatly in a subdivision. It was the kind of place that had history, faded green shutters, a long gravel driveway, and a cliff in the back where you could see the ocean of Blackthorn Cove if you stood at the right angle. She had invited me and our other friend Talia to sleep over. For weeks leading up to it, it was all we talked about at lunch. Middle school drama felt so big back then. Crushes, friend fights, who sat with who at the cafeteria table. I couldn't wait to stay up all night and vent about it all. The ride over to Marissa's was long. My mom drove me through winding back roads, trees on both sides, no street lights. The kind of quiet where you noticed your own breathing. My mom glanced at me as we pulled into the driveway. "You've got your phone, right?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, holding it up. "Good. And remember, if you feel weird about anything, just call me. Doesn't matter how late it is." I rolled my eyes a little. "Mom, I'll be fine. It's just Marissa's." Still, she lingered in the car, even after I got out, waiting until Marissa came to the door to wave before she pulled away. At the time, I thought she was just being overprotective. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if she had that same gut feeling I would later. Marissa's house was even creepier up close. The front porch creaked under my shoes, and the windows reflected nothing but blackness from the forest. Inside, though, it was cozy in that still moving in kind of way. Boxes stacked in the hallway, mismatched furniture. Marissa's mom greeted me warmly and told us pizza would be here soon. Talia was already there, sprawled out on the living room floor with a pile of blankets. "Finally," she said, throwing a pillow at me. "We've been waiting forever." I laughed and dropped my bag. "Sorry, my mom drives like a grandma." Marissa smirked. "Don't blame her. My mom said there are like moose and coyotes on these back roads. I wouldn't want to drive fast either." We set up our camp in the living room. Pillows everywhere, blankets in a heap, the usual sleepover chaos. When the pizza finally arrived, we devoured it while blasting music from Marissa's phone. For a while, it felt like any normal Friday night we played Truth or Dare. We laughed too hard over TikToks. We gossiped about the people in our class who seemed to live for drama. Hours blurred by, and when the clock hit almost 11, the energy in the room had shifted. That restless kind of boredom kicked in, the kind that makes you want to do something stupid just to break the lull. Talia suggested, "Let's go for a walk. Down the road. Just for like 10 minutes. Marissa bit her lip. "I don't know. My mom might say no." "Ask her," Talia pressed. "Come on, it's not like we're sneaking out. We'll stay together," Marissa reluctantly asked, and to our surprise, her mom shrugged. "Stay on the road, don't go wandering off, and don't take too long. It's late." That was all we needed. The gravel road stretched ahead of us, framed by tall pines that blocked out the sky. The air had that damp, salty edge that always drifted in from Blackthorn Cove at night. Our flashlights cut small circles into the darkness, but beyond that was nothing. At first, it felt exciting. We laughed too loud, daring each other to run ahead, whispering spooky stories just to freak each other out. But about 10 minutes in, we weren't laughing anymore, because we weren't alone. I saw him first. A man walking toward us on the opposite side of the road. At first, I told myself it was nothing. People walked at night all the time, right? But the more we looked, the less sense it made. He was wearing a thick padded jacket, like the kind you'd wear in January. But it was nearly 60 degrees out, and we were sweating in hoodies. His hood was up, shadowing most of his face. We passed him without saying a word. The smell hit us before anything else. It was putrid, like rotting garbage left in the sun, like something dead. I gagged, covering my nose. "Jesus," Talia muttered, stumbling sideways. Marissa whispered, "Oh my God, what the hell is that smell?" We hurried past, holding our breath until we thought we were clear. Talia darted to the tree line, dry heaving. "Let's just go back," I said firmly. "Seriously, I don't like this." Everyone agreed without hesitation, but heading back meant passing him again. And this time, when we glanced over our shoulders, he wasn't walking in the same direction anymore. He was behind us, following. Our footsteps quickened. Gravel crunched under our sneakers. I tried to keep my breathing even, but my chest felt tight. "Is he?" Marissa whispered. "Yes," I hissed. We walked faster. He walked faster. We started jogging. He jogged too. "Run!" Talia screamed. We bolted. My lungs burned, my heart hammering. I risked a glance back and saw him sprinting now, arms pumping, something metallic catching the faint beam of my flashlight. It looked like a knife. "Go! Go!" I shouted. We screamed as we tore down the road. And then, just as suddenly as he charged, he stopped. Stood there, motionless, watching us flee. His silhouette lingered against the tree line, like a nightmare burned into my eyes. We didn't stop running until Marissa's house came into view. We stumbled inside, slammed the door, locked it, and collapsed in the living room, gasping for air. No one wanted to wake her parents. We were terrified they wouldn't believe us, or worse, that we'd be blamed for sneaking around. So we made a silent agreement. We wouldn't say anything. Not tonight. But the night wasn't over. It was nearly 2 a.m. by the time we'd calmed down enough to put on a movie. Something scary, because for some reason that felt safer than silence. The house overlooked Blackthorn Cove, which meant the entire backside was lined with big glass windows. Marissa had warned us that deer sometimes came right up to them at night. So when I heard footsteps outside, right by the window where I sat, I told myself it was probably the deer. But when I pressed my face to the glass, I didn't see a deer. I saw nothing, just black. "I swear I heard something," I whispered. "Probably the deer," Marissa mumbled, not taking her eyes off the screen. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to, but my stomach twisted. The night dragged on. By 3 a.m., Marissa and Talia were asleep, but I couldn't. Every creak of the house set my nerves on edge. The moonlight shifted across the waves below the cliff, and I caught movement. Just a flicker. In the trees, I grabbed a flashlight. I wish I hadn't, because when the beam hit the tree line, I saw him again. The man. Only this time, he wasn't wearing his heavy jacket. He wasn't wearing anything above the waist. His pale chest gleamed in the light. My throat closed. I dropped the flashlight. "Marissa, Talia, wake up." Talia stirred, groggy. "What? What is it?" "Look, out there." But when she looked, he was gone. Talia groaned. "You're imagining things. Stop trying to freak me out." She rolled over and pulled the blanket over her head. I sat awake, shaking. And then, around 4:30, came the knock. 3 slow knocks on the front door. I froze. Every cell in my body screamed not to move, not to answer. But I couldn't help myself. I crept to the peephole. No one. I stumbled back, heart pounding, covered myself with a blanket like that thin fabric could protect me. At some point, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a restless sleep. But the smell woke me. That same unbearable stench. Inside the house. I sat up in the dark, bile rising in my throat. Footsteps creaked across the living room floor. I whipped my flashlight around, and the beam landed on him. The man, standing in the corner of the room, watching. I screamed. Talia and Marissa bolted upright, their shrieks joining mine, and just like before, he ran. Out the back door, into the woods, gone before Marissa's parents rushed down the stairs. We told them everything through tears. Marissa's mom called the police. Her dad grabbed his shotgun and stormed out into the night. The cops came an hour later. They searched the area. They found nothing at first, but a week later, we heard. That old shed down the road, the one we dared each other to go near earlier in the night, was searched inside, were 5 bodies in various stages of decay. And suddenly, everything made sense. The jacket, the smell, his silence. We were seconds, maybe inches, away from being added to that shed. I still think about that night, about how easily it could have gone differently, about how, if he hadn't stopped running, if one of us had tripped, if I'd opened the door at that knock, we wouldn't be here. I never went to another sleepover again. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, carrying that sharp, salty air from the cove, I swear I can still smell it, that sickly, rotting stench, the reminder of what was waiting in the woods. I've never been the type to think much about ghosts. Honestly, I always thought that stuff belonged in movies or campfire stories, not real life. But the sleepover I had at my friend Daniel's house when I was 13, it's the one night that still makes me question everything I believed about what's real and what isn't. Even now, years later, I can remember every single detail, every sound, every flicker of fear that made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. Daniel and I had been best friends since 4th grade. He'd just moved to our neighborhood back then, and we bonded over video games and our mutual hatred for math homework. By the time we were in middle school, we practically lived at each other's houses. I knew his parents, his younger sister, even his golden retriever. We'd had sleepovers before, but this one was different because it was the first one at his family's new house. His dad had gotten a promotion at work, which meant they could afford a bigger place. When I first heard that, I pictured some fancy modern home with clean lines and a flat-screen TV in every room. But when Daniel's mom drove me over on that Friday evening, my stomach sank as soon as I saw it. The house wasn't modern at all. It was old. Not just a little old, but the kind of old where the paint peels on the shutters and the front porch sags in the middle. "This place is huge," I said, trying to sound impressed as I grabbed my backpack from the car. Daniel smirked. "Yeah, but it's kinda creepy at night, you'll see." He wasn't wrong. The house sat on a wide lot at the edge of town, with giant oak trees that made the yard feel like it was swallowed in shade, even before the sun went down. His mom said it used to belong to some retired professor who had passed away a few years earlier, and his family bought it because the price was too good to pass up. To me, it felt like the kind of place people whispered about in ghost stories. The inside was just as eerie. The wooden floors creaked under every step. The hallways were lined with old wallpaper that had yellowed over the years, and the doors were those heavy ones with brass knobs that clanked when you closed them. His parents hadn't even finished unpacking yet, so half the room still had stacks of boxes shoved against the walls. We set up in the living room first. His parents ordered pizza, and we tore into it while playing video games until our eyes hurt. Around 9, his little sister Emma went upstairs to bed, and his parents followed not long after. By then, Daniel and I were sprawled on the floor, surrounded by empty soda cans, chip bags, and a pile of candy wrappers. "You ever been up in the attic yet?" Daniel asked suddenly, his voice lower like he didn't want his parents to hear. I shook my head. "No. Why?" "There's some weird stuff up there. Old trunks and mirrors and I don't know, just creepy junk. My dad said most of it came with the house." I laughed nervously. "So what? It's just storage." He grinned in that way that meant he was about to push me into something stupid. "Bet you wouldn't stay up there alone for 10 minutes. I groaned. "Seriously? We're doing dares now?" "Come on, man," he pressed. "Don't tell me you're scared. It's just an attic. What's the worst that could happen?" I wanted to say no, but the way he was looking at me, I knew he'd never let me live it down if I backed out. So I shrugged, trying to act casual. "Fine, 10 minutes, no big deal." We waited until the house felt completely quiet. No footsteps upstairs, no creaks from his parents moving around. Then Daniel led me to the hallway on the 2nd floor. At the very end was a square opening in the ceiling with a pull-down ladder. Even though it was closed, I could see faint drafts of cool air seeping down from it. Daniel reached up, tugged the cord, and the ladder unfolded with a long, creaking groan. He handed me a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. "Here, you're gonna need this." I tried to laugh it off, but my palms were already sweating as I grabbed it. 10 minutes, right? Yup, I'll keep time, don't chicken out. I climbed the ladder slowly, each rung bending under my weight. The moment my head poked through the opening, a musty odor hit me hard, like a mix of mold, dust, and something sour, almost like spoiled milk. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself the rest of the way up. The flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, catching dust motes that floated like tiny ghosts in the stale air. The attic was huge, with slanted wooden beams and a floor that creaked under my sneakers. Boxes were stacked in uneven towers, some half collapsed, spilling out yellowed books and cracked picture frames. There was broken furniture too, chairs with missing legs, a dresser with its drawers pulled out, and several old trunks with their leather peeling. I told myself it was just an attic, nothing scary about that. But then my light caught on something propped against the far wall, a mirror. It was tall and narrow, framed in tarnished gold that was flaking in places. The glass was so cloudy with grime, I could barely make out my reflection. Still, something about it pulled me closer, like I had to see myself in it. As I raised my sleeve to wipe the surface, the glass shimmered, not like a trick of dust, but like rippling water. For a split second, I saw something that wasn't me, a man. He was tall, thin, dressed in a black suit that looked out of fashion, like something from 100 years ago. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his eyes, God, his eyes were just dark pits, no whites, no color. I stumbled back, my heart hammering, and the flashlight slipped in my sweaty grip. When I looked again, it was just me staring back, pale, wide-eyed, terrified. "Everything good up there?" Daniel's voice called faintly from below. "Yeah," I shouted, though my voice cracked. I forced myself to keep looking around, trying to shake it off. Near the mirror was a trunk with the lid slightly open. I nudged it with my foot, and the lid creaked back. Inside were neatly folded men's clothes, dark suits, though they were stiff with age. Beneath them, something caught my eye. A small frame photograph. I picked it up carefully. The picture showed a family, 2 parents and a boy about my age. The glass over the father's face was cracked straight through, like someone had smashed it deliberately. My stomach tightened. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not from downstairs. These were up here with me, heavy, slow, deliberate. "Daniel," I called, my voice trembling. No answer. The footsteps stopped. I spun around, swinging the flashlight wildly, but the beam only revealed boxes and shadows. My chest tightened. Every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. Then I saw it in the mirror. The man in the black suit, standing just behind me, closer this time. His face pale as death, eyes black voids that seemed to swallow the light. I screamed, dropping the photo as I bolted for the ladder. My knee scraped against the wood as I scrambled down so fast I nearly fell. I yanked the ladder up and slammed the attic door shut. Panting, Daniel's grin vanished when he saw me. "Dude, what happened?" I shook my head, unable to speak. My throat felt locked. "Nothing," I whispered finally. "Just nothing." But I knew it wasn't nothing. A few weeks later, Daniel told me his parents were putting the house up for sale. He said his mom kept waking up at night because she swore she heard someone walking around upstairs, even when his dad checked and found nothing. They laughed it off when they told neighbors, saying maybe the house was just too big and old. But I know the truth. I know what I saw in that mirror, and it wasn't me. I never really liked sleepovers. Not the way most people talk about them. For me, they were always this strange mix of excitement and dread. Excitement, because it meant leaving home, staying up late, eating junk food, laughing until my sides hurt. Things every teenager wants. But dread, Because even as a kid, I had this uncomfortable feeling that being in someone else's house overnight meant giving up a layer of safety. I couldn't quite explain. My parents were protective, sometimes overly so, but they also trusted me enough to let me experience normal teenage stuff. That balance is probably why I agreed to go to the sleepover at Nathan's house the summer I turned 16. Looking back, I wish I'd trusted that small voice in the back of my mind telling me to say no. It was July, the sticky kind of summer where the heat clung to your skin. Even at night, I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio, Mapleton. Nothing spectacular about it. Just your average mix of suburban streets, strip malls, and patches of woods in between. My circle of friends was pretty small. There was Nathan, who was the loudest of the group, always cracking jokes, never afraid to be the center of attention. Then there was Brandon, quieter, thoughtful, the kind of guy who didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. And finally, Sarah, who wasn't officially part of the group, but floated in and out often enough that we counted her in. We'd all been hanging out more that summer since none of us had jobs yet. Most nights were spent biking around town, hanging out at the 24-hour diner near the highway, or sitting on someone's porch with music low enough not to wake the neighbors. Then Nathan got the idea for a sleepover at his place. His parents were away for the weekend, visiting family in Cincinnati. "Come on," he said, leaning against his bike as we sat outside the diner one night. "We'll order pizza, play Xbox all night, maybe sneak out later and hit the lake. Nobody's gonna stop us. It's the perfect setup." Brandon raised an eyebrow. "You sure your parents are cool with that?" Nathan grinned, shoving a fry in his mouth. "They don't need to know. They'll be back Sunday night. We got Friday and Saturday all to ourselves. No rules." Sarah sipped her soda, giving him that skeptical look she always did when he bragged. "You realize if anything happens, you're the one they're gonna kill, right?" "Nothing's gonna happen," Nathan said. "It'll just be fun. Come on, you all in?" I hesitated. I don't know why, but something about the way he said it made me uneasy. Maybe it was just my natural tendency to overthink, but the idea of staying overnight in his big, creaky house out on Old Briar Road didn't sit right. His place was surrounded by woods on 3 sides, with the nearest neighbor a good 5-minute walk down the road. But Brandon was nodding, Sarah shrugged, and I didn't want to be the odd one out. "Yeah, I'm in," I said, forcing a smile. That's how it started. Friday evening, I packed a small duffel bag, change of clothes, toothbrush, phone charger. My mom fussed over me like she always did. "Text me when you get there," she said, handing me a couple of granola bars. "And if you need me to pick you up, anytime, I mean it, you call, okay?" "I'll be fine, Mom," I muttered, embarrassed but secretly comforted. The sun was dipping low by the time I got to Nathan's place. His house always looked a little intimidating. 2 stories, dark green paint peeling in spots, shutters that rattled whenever the wind picked up. The driveway was cracked, weeds growing up through the cement. My stomach tightened when I saw it again, but I told myself I was being ridiculous. Nathan greeted me at the door with his usual grin, wearing a faded band t-shirt and gym shorts. "Dude, you made it. Brandon's already here, Sarah's on her way." I stepped inside, the air smelling faintly of dust and something else, like old wood that had soaked up years of dampness. The house was quiet in a way that felt heavier than normal silence, like it absorbed sound instead of letting it bounce. We set up in the living room, dragging out blankets, pillows, and snacks. Brandon was already sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, and gave me a small nod. Nathan shoved a slice of pizza at me the second Sarah arrived, and for a while, everything felt normal. We played games, argued over music, told dumb stories. Hours slipped by, and by midnight, the living room was a chaos of soda cans and chip bags. That's when things started to change. Around 1 a.m., the power flickered, just a quick blink, but long enough to make the TV cut out and the room go dark before the lights came back. "Damn it," Nathan muttered, banging the controller. "That better not happen again." Sarah laughed nervously. Your house is creepy enough without the lights going out. Nathan rolled his eyes. It's just old wiring, chill. But for once, he didn't pull it. We stood there in tense silence, the house groaning faintly around us. Then, clear as day, 3 slow knocks came from above us. In the attic, knock. Knock, knock. We bolted. Back downstairs, we tried to laugh it off, but nobody really could. Brandon's face was pale. Sarah kept glancing at the ceiling, and I felt sick to my stomach. Nathan tried to act unfazed, but even he couldn't keep his hands from shaking slightly when he picked up his soda. "Old houses make noise," he muttered, almost to himself, "but old houses don't knock in threes." We decided to put on a movie, something dumb and funny to distract ourselves. The sound helped a little, fill in the heavy silence, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow in that house felt darker than it should have been. Around 3 a.m., Sarah dozed off against the arm of the couch. Brandon half asleep in a chair. Nathan was scrolling his phone when the power cut out again. This time for good. The TV went black. The lamps died. The only light came from the moon through the thin curtains. And then we heard it again. The footsteps. But this time, they weren't upstairs. They were on the stairs, coming down. Nathan jumped up, grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. He flicked it on, the beam shaking as it lit the staircase. We all stared. Halfway down the stairs stood a figure, tall, too tall. Its head nearly brushed the ceiling. Its body looked stretched, thin arms dangling too long at its sides. The beam of the flashlight caught its face, or what should have been a face, but it was wrong flat, featureless except for 2 deep indentations where eyes should have been. Sarah screamed. Brandon scrambled back. My whole body locked up. The figure didn't move at first. It just stood there, staring with those hollow indentations. Then, slowly, it tilted its head, like it was studying us. Nathan dropped the flashlight. The beam spun across the floor as the figure took 1 step forward. The sound was unmistakable, dragging, like something heavy being pulled. That broke me free. "Run!" I shouted. We bolted out the back door, barefoot, not even thinking about grabbing our stuff. The night air was thick and hot, but it felt like freedom compared to the suffocating weight of that house. We tore across the yard into the trees, branches scratching at our arms. Sarah was sobbing, Brandon wheezing as he tried to keep up. Nathan, for once, was silent. We didn't stop until we saw the faint glow of a streetlight at the end of Old Briar Road. Only then did we collapse, gasping for air, our bodies trembling. "What the hell was that?" Sarah cried. No one answered. There was no answer. We called my mom from a payphone at the gas station down the road. She picked us up, furious and terrified all at once. Nathan begged us not to tell his parents what happened, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't so sure anymore. The next day, when we went back in daylight to get our bags, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The upstairs looked normal. The attic hatch was closed, no footprints, no sign of anything. But Nathan's flashlight, the one he dropped, was lying on the bottom step of the staircase. The batteries were drained completely. We never talked about it much after that night. Not in detail. Sarah moved away the next year. Brandon and I stayed friends, but we avoided Old Briar Road. Nathan changed. He stopped joking as much, got quieter, like something had been taken out of him. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see that figure, too tall, too thin, its face hollow. And I wonder if it ever really stayed behind in that house, or if it followed us out into the woods, waiting for another night, because every now and then, late at night, when the world is quiet and the house creaks, I swear I can still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd end up breaking into someone's home. I wasn't raised that way, at least not intentionally. My mother worked long shifts as a nurse, and my father left when I was 10, bills piled up. By the time I turned 16, I'd started running errands for guys in my neighborhood who were a little more resourceful with money. What started as lifting car radios and shoplifting cigarettes turned into something darker with every year that passed. Now, at 26, I was knee-deep in a life I once swore I'd never touch, and on that particular night, I sat crouched in the woods with sweat clinging to my forehead, watching the driveway lights of a house I should have never agreed to hit right on time, Leon whispered beside me. Leon was my best friend, though best didn't really cover it. We'd grown up together, two kids from broken families who ended up relying on each other more than we ever did on our parents. He was tougher than me, meaner too when he needed to be. But he wasn't stupid. If Leon said a job was worth it, I usually believed him. I kept my eyes on the headlights as they swung down the long driveway, paused at the road, then disappeared into the winding darkness. My heart slowed just a little. "You sure they're gone for the night?" I asked. Still crouched in the brush, 30 yards from the gravel entrance, Leon nodded, his face barely visible in the moonlight. "Watched them all week. Friday night they go out around 8. Don't come back till after midnight. It's like clockwork." Our truck sat almost a mile down the road at an old turnout that led nowhere, swallowed by the trees. It was Leon's idea to park far and approach on foot through the woods, so we wouldn't risk headlights giving us away. My legs were sore from the slow trek, but it was better than prison. We waited another 10 minutes, just in case they forgot something, and came back. The forest was thick, and the night was quiet in that eerie way that made you too aware of your own breathing. Finally, Leon slung his backpack over one shoulder. "Let's go." We darted across the road and made for the house. The place was massive, the kind of mansion cabin hybrid you only saw in glossy magazines. 3 stories of dark wood and glass, a wraparound porch made from finished logs, and warm lights glowing faintly through drawn curtains. It was too perfect, like it belonged to people who never worried about the things that chewed men like me down to the bone. "You said there's no alarm, right?" I whispered as we crept toward the porch. "They got one, but they don't use it. I tested it last Tuesday." Leon grinned like he was proud of himself. "Tested it how?" "Picked the lock, opened the front door, waited. Nothing happened." I shook my head. "Jesus, Leon," he shrugged. "Relax, that's why we're here. Easy job, easy payout. Word is, they got jewels, real ones, not just some pawn shop knockoffs." We reached the porch. My gut twisted as Leon knelt at the front door, pulling out his lock-picking kit. I stood behind him, scanning the shadows. It didn't take him long. The soft click of the deadbolt giving way sounded far too casual for what we were doing. We stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of cedar. The interior was immaculate. Rich hardwood floors, walls polished to a shine, furniture that looked more for display than for comfort. It was both warm and sterile, like someone had designed it for a catalog shoot rather than for living in. Leon put his kit away and whispered, "Told you." Easy. I was about to reply when I heard something. A faint click behind me. I turned to the door, half expecting someone to be standing there, but nothing, just the closed door, quiet as it had been when I shut it. "You hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" Leon was already pulling on latex gloves. "Nothing," I muttered, though unease prickled my spine. "All right, you take upstairs. I'll check down here," Leon said. I nodded and started toward the staircase. I had one hand on the railing when I heard Leon curse. "What is it?" I rushed back, heart leaping. He was standing in front of a closed door, holding his palm up. Blood ran in thin streams down his glove. "What the hell happened?" I asked, staring at the gash. "I don't know," he said, shaking his head. "I just touched the damn doorknob." "What?" I leaned in to inspect the knob. It was ornate with carved patterns, but nothing sharp enough to slice like that. "You okay? You need stitches?" "No way, I'm fine." He pulled off his backpack and dug out a spare t-shirt. Ripping a strip with his teeth, he wrapped it around his palm. Damn it, that was my favorite shirt. I tried to smile. You want me to open the door for you? Hell no, I got it. He grabbed the knob with his other hand and pushed the door open without issue. I shook my head and turned back toward the stairs. I'd barely taken 2 steps when pain erupted in my foot. So suddenly it ripped a scream from me. I collapsed at the bottom of the stairs, clutching my right foot. My shoe was half gone, and so were my 2 little toes. Blood poured between my fingers. Jesus Christ, Leon shouted, rushing over. There was nothing there, I cried, staring at the jagged mess of flesh. A panel in the stair opened, and I saw it, a knife on a mechanical arm, glowing orange from a tiny blue-white torch flame. It retracted just as quickly, vanishing back into the wood. What the fuck? Leon muttered, backing up. My vision blurred from the pain. I grabbed the still glowing knife, pressed it to my mangled toes, and screamed as I cauterized the wound. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. I hurled the knife away, gasping. Leon disappeared toward the front door and came back a moment later, panic in his eyes. I can't open it. It's locked. Won't budge. My blood ran cold. I thought about that faint click I'd heard earlier. Who told you about this place? I asked. Caesar, Leon muttered, avoiding my gaze. And where the hell did he hear about it? I don't know, man. I don't ask. He said it'd be easy money. Leon, this is a setup. The house wasn't a house. It was a machine. Every step, every door, every corner was designed to maim, trap, or kill. Leon lost half his hand to a blade hidden in the kitchen doorway. I watched him trip backward onto a stair, only for a buzzing saw to rip through him. His screams still echo in my head. When I try to sleep, I didn't even have the strength to move his whole body. I used his leg, severed and cauterized with shaking hands. As a tool to test each step on the staircase, I gagged and vomited, but I forced myself through it. At the top, a dart shot out from the banister. It embedded itself into Leon's lifeless limb instead of my chest. I realized I would have died instantly. There was one window that opened to the sloped roof. I thought I'd made it. I thought freedom was 10 feet below, just a jump to the backyard. But when I landed, spikes began rising from the grass, as if the earth itself was rejecting me. I tried to run, my feet were shredded, my hands pierced, my body impaled as I crawled, crying, praying. And then I saw it. A drone hovered above me, camera lens glinting. It tilted as if studying me, recording me. That was when I understood. We weren't robbing a house, we were entertainment. Someone had built this place not to live in, but to watch men like me and Leon suffer, to bleed, to die. As the spikes pressed into my temple, my last thought wasn't of escape. It was of Caesar, and how much he got paid to send us here. I never really thought much about how certain memories get burned into your head, like photographs that never fade, no matter how much you wish they would. I've had a lot of regular childhood sleepovers, the kind where you eat too much pizza, laugh at dumb jokes, and stay up too late watching movies you shouldn't be watching. But the one I'm about to tell you about, the one that happened when I was 13, is a memory I can't shake. It was the kind of night that seemed fun and ordinary at first, but it slowly twisted into something terrifying, something that still wakes me up sometimes, covered in sweat. It was the fall of 2007. I was in 8th grade, living in a quiet town called Maplewood. To be honest, Maplewood wasn't much of anything, just a collection of cul-de-sac neighborhoods, a middle school, a strip mall, and a park that people liked to pretend was scenic. My parents were always busy with work, and I was an only child, so sleepovers were my way of not feeling alone all the time. That Friday, my best friend at the time, Daniel Marks, invited me to stay the night at his place. He had just turned 14, And his parents, unlike mine, were more relaxed. They let us stay up late, play video games, eat junk food, and watch scary movies. He lived in one of those two-story houses at the end of a long street lined with identical homes, the kind where you can never tell one from the other except for the color of the shutters. His house had these dark green shutters, a basketball hoop in the driveway, and a garage that never closed properly unless you slammed it twice. Besides me and Daniel, two other friends were invited, Chris Sullivan and Ethan Romero. We were a pretty tight group back then. Chris was the funny one, always cracking jokes and making faces. Ethan was quieter, but he had this way of observing everything, like he was 2 steps ahead of us. I always felt safer when Ethan was around, though I didn't know why. When I got to Daniel's house that evening, around 6 p.m., his mom was setting out pizza boxes on the counter, and his dad was already halfway out the door, saying he had to drive his sister to the airport. His parents were good people, but they left us mostly unsupervised. That night was no exception. "Finally, man," Daniel said when I walked in with my backpack. "You're late. We're about to start the game." "Blame my mom," I said, dropping my stuff near the couch. "She thinks if I don't pack half my room, I'll starve to death." Chris laughed from the kitchen, his mouth full of pizza. "Your mom probably packed you kale chips and protein bars." "Shut up," I shot back, but I was smiling. The evening started out normal. We ate too much pizza, played Halo 3 until our eyes hurt, and argued about whether Ethan cheated because he somehow always had the sniper rifle. Around 10 p.m., Daniel suggested we watch a scary movie. "I rented The Ring from Blockbuster," he said proudly, like he had discovered buried treasure. Chris rolled his eyes. "That movie's old, man. My cousin said it's lame." "Yeah, well, your cousin still wets the bed," Daniel snapped back. Ethan chuckled quietly and said, "It's either that or we watch Finding Nemo again." So, we ended up watching The Ring, lights off, sound cranked way too high. Every time the creepy girl crawled out of the TV, Chris screamed louder than the actual movie. By the time it ended, it was close to midnight. That's when things started to feel off. We were all lying on the floor of Daniel's living room, wrapped in blankets, eating chips, and talking about random stuff. At some point, Chris brought up the idea of telling ghost stories. "Dude, my brother told me something last week," he said. "There's this house, like 3 blocks from here, that's supposed to be haunted. He said some guy hung himself in the basement." "Bullshit," Daniel said, tossing a pillow at him. "I'm serious," Chris insisted. "People still hear banging from the basement window at night, like he's trying to get out." "Yeah, sure," I said. "And I'm sure your brother didn't make that up just to scare you." But Chris wasn't backing down. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "No, for real. We could walk there. It's not that far. I'll show you." Ethan looked at him like he was crazy. "At midnight? In the dark? Pass." Daniel grinned. "I'm down. What about you?" He looked at me. I hesitated. My gut said no, but part of me wanted to prove I wasn't scared. "Fine," I said finally, "but only if we're back in like 10 minutes. So like idiots, we grabbed our hoodies, slipped on our shoes, and snuck out the back door. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. The streetlights buzzed faintly, casting pools of orange light on the sidewalks. The air smelled damp, like it might rain. We walked 3 blocks, whispering and laughing too loudly, trying to mask the nervous energy we all felt. Finally, Chris pointed to a small, beat-up house wedged between 2 nicer ones. Its paint was peeling, the windows were dark, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. It looked abandoned, but something about it felt wrong, like it was holding its breath, waiting. "There," Chris said. "Told you," Daniel smirked. "All right, let's check it out." "Wait," I said quickly. "We're not going inside." "Scared?" Daniel teased. "No, but," Ethan cut in. "He's right. We can look, but we're not breaking in." We walked up to the edge of the yard. The grass was wet, soaking through our shoes. Chris whispered, "Look, down there." We followed his gaze to a basement window, half covered by bushes. The glass was dirty, but I swear I saw movement inside, like a shadow shifting. Probably a rat, Ethan said, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Then, faintly, we heard it. Tap, 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 3 knocks against the glass. None of us moved, none of us breathed. Chris whispered, "Holy shit, did you hear that?" Before anyone could answer, something scraped across the glass from the inside, slow and deliberate, like fingernails dragging. That was enough for me. Nope, I'm done. I turned and started walking back toward the street. The others followed, though not as fast as I wanted. When we reached the sidewalk, Daniel finally laughed. "Okay, that was freaky, but maybe it was just the wind or something." "Wind doesn't knock," I muttered. We thought that was the end of it, but the night was far from over. Back at Daniel's house, we locked the doors, closed the blinds, and tried to shake it off. We went back to playing video games, trying to act normal. But sometime after 1 a.m., the power went out. Everything went dark. The hum of the refrigerator, the buzz of the TV, the faint glow from the streetlight outside, all gone. Did your house just die?" Chris whispered. Daniel frowned. "Breaker probably tripped. It happens sometimes." "Yeah, but why now?" Ethan asked quietly. We sat there in the dark, the only light coming from the moon through the blinds. Then came another sound, tap, tap, tap. This time, it wasn't a basement window. It was the sliding glass door in the kitchen. I froze. My chest felt like it was caving in. Slowly, we all turned toward the sound. The blinds were drawn, but the tapping continued. Chris whispered, "Tell me that's the wind." Nobody answered. Daniel, trying to be brave, grabbed a flashlight from the drawer and flicked it on. He walked to the blinds and yanked them open. For a split second we saw it, just the outline of someone standing outside the glass door. A tall, thin figure, head tilted at an unnatural angle. Daniel dropped the flashlight. It rolled across the floor, spinning its beam wildly. When he looked back, the figure was gone. What happened after that is a blur. We barricaded the back door with chairs, grabbed whatever we could find that looked like a weapon, baseball bats, fireplace pokers, and huddled together in the living room. None of us wanted to admit it, but we were terrified. Around 3 a.m., the power suddenly flicked back on. The TV blared, the lights burned bright, and the sudden noise made us all jump. We stayed up until dawn, too scared to sleep. When Daniel's mom came downstairs and found us pale, wide-eyed, and clutching bats, she thought we had just spooked ourselves with the movie. We never told her what we saw outside the glass door. But here's the thing. A week later, police cars were parked outside that abandoned house Chris had shown us. Word around the neighborhood was that someone had been living in the basement, squatting there for months. When I heard that, my stomach dropped because I couldn't stop wondering if whoever was living there had followed us back that night. I was 27 the first time I ever lived truly alone. For most of my adult life, there had always been someone else nearby, roommates in college, a girlfriend for 4 years, and later shared apartments with friends when I couldn't quite cover rent on my own. Noise had been my constant companion. Muffled voices through thin walls, footsteps overhead, late-night laughter drifting through the vents. I used to complain about it. I told myself I wanted silence, space, independence. But when I finally got those things, I learned that silence has its own weight. 6 months before everything happened, I signed the lease on a small one-story house on the edge of Denton, Texas. The place wasn't impressive. White paint peeling in spots, a roof that sagged just a little too much on one corner, and a patchy front yard where weeds sprouted between cracks in the concrete walkway. The backyard was enclosed by a rusted chain-link fence, its gate squealing whenever it opened. But the rent was affordable, and for the first time, I had a driveway of my own, a porch light to leave on when I came home late, and the ability to close a door without hearing anyone else's life bleeding into mine. I told myself it was freedom. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly older couples and families who kept to themselves. They waved politely when I passed but didn't linger. On weekends, you'd hear lawnmowers or the faint buzz of kids' bikes on the street, but evenings were still, almost unnaturally so. After the chaos of the last 2 years, that quiet felt like salvation. The years leading up to the move had been rough. My father passed away suddenly from a heart attack when I was 25. I'd been working a dead-end job at a logistics warehouse in Dallas, and in the aftermath, I spiraled. I stayed too long with a woman I shouldn't have, drank too much, stopped answering calls from friends. By the time that relationship collapsed in spectacular fashion, I was broke, heartbroken, and back in my childhood room at my mother's house. I felt like a failure. So when I scraped together enough savings to move again, I promised myself this time would be different. No roommates, no chaos, just me, a quiet house, and a chance to rebuild my life without anyone else's drama spilling into mine. That was the idea anyway. The first few weeks in the house, I told myself I loved it. I'd come home from work, pull into the driveway, and sit in the car for a minute staring at the porch light glowing against the twilight mine. Just mine. But nights were hard. Lying in bed, I'd notice every sound. The groan of the wood frame shifting with the wind. The faint scratch of tree branches brushing the roof. Once, I thought I heard footsteps in the backyard, but when I peeked out the blinds, there was nothing. I laughed it off when I told my friend Marcus over the phone. "It's just you being jumpy," he said. "You've always had people around. You're not used to the quiet." "Yeah," I said, "that's probably it." But part of me wasn't so sure. It was a Friday morning in late April, humid air already clinging to the windows, when the knock came. I was barefoot in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee pot to finish brewing, when the sharp rap on the front door jolted me so hard I spilled coffee grounds across the counter. Nobody ever came to the house unannounced. Deliveries were usually in the afternoon. I set the filter down and walked to the front door. Moving slowly through the cloudy peephole, I saw a man I didn't recognize. Mid-40s maybe, with a scruffy beard and a faded baseball cap. His shirt was a worn flannel that looked like it had seen better days. He held a toolbox in one hand and a clipboard in the other. I hesitated, then cracked the door open just a few inches, leaving the chain lock across. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man smiled quickly, but it didn't look genuine. "Morning. Here to check the pipes. Previous owner mentioned there might be an issue under the sink." My stomach dropped. Karen Lopez, my landlord, was meticulous about communication. She texted twice in 1 week to remind me to mow the lawn. There was no way she'd forget to tell me about plumbing repairs. "I think you have the wrong house," I said carefully. He shook his head. No, this is the right one. He told me to stop by today." Something in his voice made my pulse quicken. "What's my landlord's name?" I asked. He froze, just for a second, but long enough. Then, Thompson. That wasn't even close. "I'm sorry," I said, starting to close the door. "You're not supposed to be here." Before I could shut it fully, his hand shot out and gripped the edge of the door. "Look, miss," he said, his voice sharper now. "I'm just here to do my job." My heart hammered. "I'm calling my landlord to check," I snapped, hoping it would make him back off. Instead, his grip tightened. His eyes narrowed. "You don't need to do that," he said low and flat. "Just let me in. 10 minutes, and I'm gone." Adrenaline surged. I slammed the door with all my weight, forcing his hand free, and locked it. He pounded on the door, shouting something I couldn't make out. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone. 911, what's your emergency?" "There's a man at my door," I gasped. "He tried to force his way in. He says he's a plumber, but he's not." The dispatcher told me to stay on the line. I pressed my back to the door, every thud of his fist reverberating through my chest. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They walked the property, took my statement, and found muddy footprints leading toward the street. A cigarette butt near the driveway. Nothing else. I told myself it was over. Just a random creep who'd move on. But 2 nights later, around 1 a.m., I learned how wrong I was. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, the blinds cracked slightly to let in the orange glow of the street lamp. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. At first, I thought it was just branches swaying, but then I saw him, the same man, standing outside my bedroom window. My body locked up, my throat went dry. He was so close I could see the rise and fall of his chest, the glint of his eyes as he stared straight at me. I scrambled for my phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. "He's here," I whispered frantically. "The man from before, he's outside my window." The dispatcher told me to stay calm, stay quiet, stay on the line, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, as if waiting. It wasn't until the sirens grew closer that he finally turned and slipped into the darkness. The officers searched the area but found nothing, just fresh cigarette butts near the fence and more footprints in the mud. It was clear then, he hadn't just stumbled onto my house, he'd been watching. The following days blurred together. I slept in fits, jumping at every sound. I kept the blinds closed. I carried a kitchen knife from room to room. Then Karen, my landlord, texted me. "Did you let the plumber in last week? He said he stopped by but couldn't get in." I froze. "What plumber?" I typed back. "Nobody told me about one." She called immediately. "His name's Gregor, older guy. Said he was scheduled for Friday. He told me he knocked but no one answered." My skin went cold. "Karen," I whispered, "that man tried to break into my house. The police have already been here. Twice." There was silence on the line. Then, barely audible, "Oh my God." A week later, they caught him. Not because of me, because he broke into another woman's house a few streets over. She escaped through the back door and called the police. They arrested him that night. His name was Clifford Ray. He wasn't a plumber. He wasn't anything but a predator who had been targeting women living alone across multiple counties. Assault charges, stalking, breaking, and entering. When an officer updated me, his words etched into my mind. "You're lucky you called when you did. He doesn't stop until someone makes him stop." I moved out a month later. I couldn't stay. I packed my belongings into a U-Haul and left that little house behind. Porch light still burning in the daylight as if mocking me, but leaving didn't end it. In my new apartment across town, I still double-check every lock, every window, every night. I keep a knife on my nightstand. I jump at shadows in the corner of my eye. Living alone was supposed to feel freeing. Instead, it feels like waiting for the next knock, the next shadow, the next stranger at the window. I don't think I'll ever feel safe again.